The phrase "a picture speaks 1,000 words" could not be any more true than this one. I'm not going to waste time with the intro. I'm just going to get straight into it.
A few people already this morning have mentioned that Newsnight interview conducted by my learned friend Emily Maitlis, which continues to have extraordinary ramifications and ripples. But to be clear, Emily, this is about the Epstein files. I mean, the sense of a blue touch paper being lit back when you sat down with the then Duke of Windsor is impossible to shake. But the story now is moving into entirely different territory.
Honestly, I think I'm the last person to come to this bit of news. I walked out of a physiotherapy appointment for my back and just suddenly realised what had happened. So, I mean, without getting too sort of therapeutic about it, I'm actually just trying to take all this in as we speak. And I keep thinking of that it's Ernest Hemingway, that quote, which is gradually and then suddenly. You know, part of my brain thinks that interview was 6 years ago. Yeah. You know, it was a long time ago. So in a way, we've all kind of been, you know, we've kind of been at the point of expecting something to happen. But I think what we are learning is actually how critical the release of the Epstein files have been to all this, because allegations of sexual abuse, notoriously hard to prove. I mean, isn't that the pain that, you know, so many of the victims have had right the way through, that they have not been believed or they've not been listened to, or they've literally been called liars and they've been called frauds and they've been called money grabbers. And I guess there is an irony in a way, isn't there, that this has all happened so quickly in the last 3 weeks because of what looks to be, and obviously, you know, that all we know is what is alleged. It looks to be an email chain that traces, you know, what Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was sending to Epstein involving trade or trade deals or stuff that were basically part of national security.
Well, both big breakthroughs, for want of a better word perhaps, to do with that, both the Mandelson and the Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor story, to do with the alleged passing of information, potentially sensitive information, to the paedophile, not to do with, as you remind us, with the other allegations that surround certainly Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor and obviously the dead financier Jeffrey Epstein. And those investigations continue. 8 forces joining the Epstein files investigation. To sort of nudge you into the arena of opinion and speculation, how significant have the desperate attempts of the White House to downplay, to keep secret, to continue, of course, to misrepresent what is contained within them from Donald Trump himself? How big an obstacle to justice do you think that has been? Or let's say to progress, because we don't know what justice means in the current context.
I would say that there is a sort of trend emerging now, which is every time Trump tries to silence somebody or shut something down, it just becomes bigger. You know, whether it's politicians appearing on the Stephen Colbert show, whether it's the freedom to look at the Epstein files, whether it's the way journalists are talking, the way universities are teaching. Every time Trump focuses on something, in order to shut it down, we sort of turn around and go, hang on, maybe we should be looking at this a bit more closely. So I think there is definitely an argument that if Trump had not been quite so defensive about this, if he had stuck to his original sort of line, which was, you know, talking to his MAGA base about the importance of getting this all out, J.D. Vance saying there is a network of paedophilia going on, we need to see it all. I think it wouldn't sort of sit so starkly with what has been happening in the last 6 months in the White House. You know, Pam Bondi's saying there's nothing to see here, let's talk about the stock market as a case in point.
What do we know about the process of release? And the answer to this may be nothing, but you're a lot more clued up on this than I am. Because this huge tranche of documents, millions of pieces of evidence potentially, and some of it was redacted, and then people discovered that it had been rather clumsily redacted, and they could run it through programs that would somehow remove the black. I mean,
I think there are lawsuits going on right now. There are lawsuits going on because of the redactions. More seem to be covering up the men involved in the alleged criminality than the women involved who were the victims and the survivors. And so there are lawyers working for the survivors now who say, I don't understand. Like, this is the exact opposite. If you had planned something that would make victims of sexual abuse feel worse and feel their lives were in danger, this is what you would produce. And, I mean, we don't know if there was a calculation going on, but it's not entirely impossible that somebody was doing that to shut them up once again.
And appeared and then disappeared and then appeared again. I mean, there certainly looked to be a finger on various buttons, didn't there? And still.
Well, I mean, I spoke to Sky Roberts, who is Virginia Giuffre's brother, who has been campaigning on her behalf. I mean, even more intensively, clearly, since her death by suicide last April. And one of the things he says is, it's all there. If you want to see the names, you look in the files. The FBI took a deposition from Virginia Roberts, as was. She named 40 men, in those articles. It's all been written down. It's all there. If there was a curiosity, an appetite to actually go and pursue potential criminality, investigate criminality, they could.
Well, take it back to the personal briefly, if I may. Why do you think you are so gobsmacked by it? Is it because we are not deferential people? Well, ideally journalists. No journalists are deferential people. But we are British. We did grow up in this country where the royal family is the very pinnacle of the population pyramid, whether you like it or not. It is something that history books.
It just hasn't happened before, James.
Exactly.
You go back to Charles I. You go back to a sort of essentially a new era with Charles I, the end of the monarchy, and Oliver Cromwell to find anything sort of remotely similar. Now, I think one of the reasons I'm gobsmacked is because there is something very personal in this as well. And we talk a lot about people's sort of state of mind and health and all the rest of it. And I suppose I do feel, I feel concern, actually, as I'm watching this story unfold. And I suppose that two things can be simultaneously true, that it can have been a long time coming. It can have been, one of the sort of texts I got this morning from a former colleague, just said, finally. We, in one way, a lot of us have been expecting this to unfold. But when it does, there is somebody at the centre of it, and it is a father, and there are children, and there is a mental health question. And I suppose that's what's sort of holding me back a bit and saying this is a pretty serious moment. It's a grave moment. It's not a sort of jumping up and down moment.
No, of course not. I mean, and for the umpteenth time, but it's important to remind everybody that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor denies all allegations of wrongdoing right across the graph or the spectrum of allegations and accusations that he faces. Only one of which is the consequence of today's arrest. The suggestion or the allegation of misconduct in public office. You do. I mean, it's one of those things. I've said it to you before, that there are exceptions to every rule. A journalist is never supposed to become part of the story, but that interview that you conducted was so off the charts that it is. I mean, is it an albatross around your neck for the rest of your career, or is it a different breed of bird?
I think it's actually it's nothing to do with me. I mean, I've said this to you before.
I mean,
well, okay, but I
know exactly what you mean. I'm just intrigued.
I mean, I had the chance to sit down to pass on stuff that we had heard from survivors, from one in particular. And so, just to kind of step back from it all, as well as I do, the journalist's job is to ask the questions on behalf of the people who don't get to ask those questions, right? You do it every single day. We try and convey that in our reporting. And so I suppose I would have to go back to first principles, which is like, what does this moment feel like for the family of Virginia Giuffre, the children of Virginia Giuffre? What does it feel like? And obviously, he has not, we should say, been arrested on sexual abuse charge at all. But I guess it's really curious, actually, going back to that Sky Roberts interview. I asked him if he felt it was kind of weird that all the focus had been on the fraud or the alleged, the allegations of
white-collar crime.
Exactly, rather than sexual abuse, And, his take was, it's better to have a trail of something going somewhere than nothing at all.
Final question, drawing on your personal encounter with Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, the indignity, I mean, the sheer shock and horror of being arrested notwithstanding, a man renowned for his pomposity and arrogance, the indignity of being treated like a common or garden suspect, drinking a cup of tea probably out of a polystyrene cup, having his shoelaces removed by the custody officer, that will hit him quite hard, I think.
It's his birthday.
It's also his birthday, as you remind us.
Yeah, you do wonder, don't you? You wonder if there is... Do they still call him... What do they call him? Do they call him
Great
Sir?
question.
Do they call him Your Royal... I mean, they don't call him Your Royal Highness anymore. Do they call him Andrew? Do they...
Mr. Mountbatten-Windsor.
I don't know,
Well, Stephen, the former Deputy Assistant Chief Constable, just called him in the course of our interview 20 minutes ago, just called him Mr. Mountbatten-Windsor as if he was talking about any other suspect. And we shouldn't really be surprised by that, but we always will be.
Yeah. The thing that really struck me was a couple of weeks ago when Keir Starmer did that press conference and he called former Lord Mandelson, not even Peter Mandelson, he called him Mandelson, which, you know, in journalistic terms, you don't say Mandelson unless somebody has been like convicted, right? I mean, that's the sort of that's the sort of the pattern. And I thought it was really striking that was the term that Starmer used, Keir Starmer, Sir Keir, whatever, used to kind of distance himself at that particular moment from the man he just, you know, promoted a year earlier.
I haven't checked, but I will be very surprised if Emily and her colleagues on the newsagents don't return to some of this territory in today's...
I thought it might do the Gorton and Denton by-election a week out.
A full list of candidates is available at
Absolutely
lbc.co.uk. Emily Maitlis, thank you very much indeed.
I have some thoughts. Because look, this is one of those moments where you're watching mainstream media try to process something that a lot of us have been screaming about for years. And it's honestly kind of surreal to witness in real time. Like, these presenters are sitting there genuinely gobsmacked that a member of the royal family got arrested. And I'm thinking, guys, have you been reading the same files I've been reading? Because this should not be a surprise to anyone who's been paying attention. First, credit where it's due. The fact that we're even having this conversation on a major British radio station is progress. I mean, Prince Andrew got arrested, on his birthday no less. You genuinely cannot make this stuff up. If you wrote this in a screenplay, the producer would send it back and say, too on the nose. And the host and Emily Maitlis are clearly trying to grapple with the weight of the moment, and I appreciate that. There's a genuine sense of shock there that feels real. The Hemingway quote, gradually and then suddenly, that's actually perfect for what's happening here, because that is exactly how this whole Epstein saga has played out. Years and years of nothing, whispers, denials, that infamous Newsnight interview where Andrew couldn't even keep his lies straight about sweating. A man who literally told us on camera that he physically could not sweat because of the Falklands War, and then we all saw the photos of him sweating like he'd just run a marathon, and then boom, arrested on his birthday drinking tea out of a polystyrene cup. Gradually and then suddenly, beautiful. But here's where I start to have some issues, because even in this moment of supposed accountability, watch how carefully the conversation dances around the real story. They spend a significant amount of time talking about the misconduct in public office charge, the leaking of sensitive trade information to Epstein, and yeah, that's bad. Obviously, sharing possible state secrets with a convicted sex trafficker is bad. Sending him details about high-value commercial properties, trip reports from Vietnam and Singapore, deal flow from companies needing hundreds of millions in funding, that's a serious breach. But as even Sky Roberts, Virginia's brother, points out in the segment, the focus is on the white-collar stuff, not the sexual abuse allegations. And the host kind of acknowledges this, but then just moves on. I mean, this is the pattern, right? We keep getting accountability on the lesser charges. It's like busting Al Capone for tax evasion, except imagine if Al Capone's victims were still alive and watching everyone congratulate themselves for the tax thing while nobody talks about the murders. That's kind of what this feels like. Sky Roberts says something really important here. He says it's better to have a trail going somewhere than nothing at all. And I get that. I respect that deeply. But man, it is a sad state of affairs when the brother of a trafficking victim who took her own life is just grateful that anything is happening at all. That should make all of us deeply uncomfortable. The bar is literally on the floor and we're celebrating someone tripping over it. Now, what I do find genuinely interesting is the conversation about Trump and the White House trying to downplay the files, because Maitlis makes a really sharp observation. Every time Trump tries to shut something down, it gets bigger. And that's true. Remember, this whole thing started with the MAGA crowd saying, release the files, expose the paedophile network. J.D. Vance was out there saying, we need to see it all. And then the files actually drop and suddenly it's Pam Bondi going, nothing to see here, let's talk about the stock market. I mean, the whiplash on that is just incredible. You went from blow the whole thing open to please look at literally anything else in record time. And people noticed. Of course they noticed. You can't spend years building a political brand around exposing elite pedophile rings and then go quiet when the actual evidence lands on your desk. Well, apparently you can, but it doesn't look great. The redactions conversation is also really important, and I'm glad they brought it up. They touch on how the redactions seem designed to protect the men involved while leaving victims exposed. Lawyers for the survivors are literally saying this is the opposite of what should have happened. If you wanted to design a system to make victims feel worse and feel their lives were in danger, this is what you'd produce. And look, I've gone through these files extensively. The redaction work was either deliberately malicious or staggeringly incompetent. Documents where Epstein's own name is blacked out in one version but visible in another. Victim names left exposed while powerful men get protected. And honestly, at this point, I'm not sure which explanation is more disturbing, the malice or the incompetence. Either way, it tells you everything about whose interests are being prioritized here, and it's not the victims. It never has been. What bothers me about the segment, though, is the tone in certain moments. And I get it, they're British, they're journalists, they have to be measured. But there's this whole stretch where they're almost feeling sorry for Andrew. Oh, the indignity of being treated like a common suspect, drinking tea out of a polystyrene cup, having his shoelaces removed by the custody officer. They're literally wondering whether the police called him Sir or Mr. Mountbatten-Windsor. I mean, are we really doing this right now? Are we genuinely worried about Andrew's cup situation and what title the custody sergeant used? Virginia Giuffre is dead. She took her own life last April. Her children don't have a mother. Her brother is out here campaigning for justice on her behalf because she can't do it herself anymore. And we're sitting around contemplating the emotional toll of a polystyrene cup on a man who lived in a palace. Come on, guys, read the room. I will say, though, the moment where they discuss Keir Starmer calling Mandelson just Mandelson, dropping the Lord, dropping the Peter, that was sharp, because they're right. In media and political circles, you only strip someone down to their surname like that when they're in serious trouble. And the fact that Starmer did that to someone he'd promoted barely a year earlier tells you which way the wind is blowing. People are distancing themselves fast, the lifeboats are being deployed. But look, I don't want to be too hard on this segment, because the bigger picture here is that something is actually happening. 8 police forces have joined the investigation. A former royal has been arrested. The Epstein files are producing real, tangible consequences, at least in the UK, and that is significantly more than we've seen from the United States, where apparently the FBI still can't find any evidence to investigate anyone despite sitting on filing cabinets full of the stuff. Over there, you've got scouts who recruited girls for Epstein walking free. You've got redacted co-defendants on old draft indictments, and the official line is still, we have no evidence to predicate an investigation. Meanwhile, the UK has got 8 police forces mobilized within weeks. It's honestly embarrassing for America at this point. So yeah, it's a start. A frustrating, incomplete dances around the real issue kind of start. But it's something. And as Sky Roberts said, a trail going somewhere is better than nothing at all, even if that trail should have started years ago. Even if it took a leaked email about trade deals rather than the testimony of actual victims to get us here. That part stings, but at least the trail exists. And maybe, just maybe, it leads somewhere bigger. I guess we'll see. But I'm not holding my breath. Not with these people.